Welcome everyone to today's training on active learning, part 2. I'd like to introduce Kathee Scoggin, our presenter. Welcome, Kathee.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everybody. Glad to see you all here. So, and thanks for the claps. I can hear you, or at least see them. I hope you guys are all ready to get started this second week, and we've got a lot to get through, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that I honor one of the active learning strategies that we will be talking about. So, with that, let's just move on. So, Ben Franklin said, when you are finished changing, you are finished. And I thought that was an interesting comment because we're looking for active learning from the children we're working with so that they are active participants in their learning. And so that means that they're changing. So part of this training is about all of us changing, thinking about ways we can do something to really encourage a child to become or to be increasing their active participation and their active learning. Just a reminder, and I think Katie already mentioned this, but I'll mention it a second time. If my picture of me talking is in front of the PowerPoint or in front of the video that you see, feel free to just click on it and move it anywhere you want to get it out of the way of your seeing what you need to see. So, I like that quote from him because I think it's important for all of us. So, strategies that demand active learning. Last week we discussed the active learning strategies of using the time that the child's alert and learning ready, using the child's likes for learning, us imitating them, routines, that means consistent ones, and consistency of the environment, the communication, the people, the materials, the adaptations, the sequence in which we do it, and our behavior and our response. So, with that, I want to go on to the ones that we're going to be talking about this week. And one is going to be hand under hand, and some of you are familiar with that, and some of you aren't. The next one is the waiting and the processing time. The next one is meaningful activities, and that means meaningful activities to the child, not to us. So many times we establish something like we want to make sure that they'll let us know when they need to go to the bathroom. That may not be a priority of theirs, and therefore it comes more slowly than if we select something that they really like and that it means something to them. And then last, an environment that the child knows and can access. And we're going to be talking about the space for active learning, and we just call it the SAL. And some of you mentioned what you knew about Lily Nielsen, the woman from Denmark, is that she created and then did research on the use of a little room. And we call it the space for active learning because oftentimes we have not chosen to use the exact little room that she has developed, and therefore the reality of it is the people that now have put a trademark on certain things do not want that word used unless you're showing nothing but the little room that was created by Lily Nielsen and the one they sell. And so because those of us in America sometimes we find the cheaper way around, we have created something a lot cheaper, and secondly, it isn't always the results that she talks about. But my experience has been that I don't see that big a difference in the results. So that's why we call it a space for active learning, not because we are trying to invent something that she's already created herself, but because out of respect that they don't want the term the little room unless you're talking only about the little room that is produced by Lilyworks. And that's in your resources. So the resources that are under your outline, so if you wanted to take notes today, you will see www.lilyworks.com. LillyWorks, LillyWorks.com there, and you can go on and see some of the things that Lily, you can read some articles, you can also see some of the things she's created, you can download the catalog, you can download the price list. We don't make any money off of this, so please understand that we're simply sharing resources with you. Okay. Now, let's go to the first one, and that's hand under hand. So, what I'd like you to do is I want you to listen to this and watch me, and then I'm going to tell you when. But you're going to eventually close your eyes and do this activity, but I'm going to have you watch me first. I had to really think through this because this is a little tricky because some of you are at a computer all by yourself and some of you happen to be with a group of people or at least one other person at a computer. If you have another person in the room, you can actually do this to each other instead of to yourself. But I want everyone to think about this, and that is I'd like you to take an item that is somewhere close to you, and I'll use the example of my ice water. Okay, and I want you to put it in front of you. And so it happens to be sitting in front of me right now. Now, what you're going to do is you are going to first take, I happen to be right-handed, so this is my dominant hand. Okay? So, I am going to ask you to take your dominant hand, and you can just sort of practice this now with me. So if you're left-handed, it's the other one. If it's, so I'm going to go ahead and take my hand, my dominant hand, and put it on my non-dominant hand. And I'm going to apply a certain amount of pressure so I can really feel that somebody's hand is on top of mine. And then I'm going to guide my hand, the one that's on top, and bring it down, pick up the glass, okay? So that's what I'm doing. You don't have to have a glass. You can have a pen. A paper probably would be a little bit tougher, but you can use a paper, a book, anything that's around there. So, however, here's the trick. When I say do it now, that means I want you to close your eyes while you're doing it. So, close your eyes. You've got your item in front of you, so let me wait a few seconds for you to make sure you have the item in front of you. Now close your eyes. Take your dominant hand and put it on top of your non-dominant with enough pressure that your non-dominant hand can feel it. Guide it to pick up whatever the item was. Pick it up. Now, once again, your dominant hand is applying some pressure and is having you put it down, whatever that item was. Okay. So here's the question. When your eyes were closed, what did you notice first once you put your hand, your dominant hand on top of your non-dominant? And applied some pressure. What's the first thing you notice? Go ahead and type it in the chat window. Pressure of the hand. I noticed my dominant hand. Pressure. How cold my dominant hand was. The hand that was on top of my hand. How warm it was. I couldn't move my non-dominant hand. It was awkward and warm. I cupped my hand. It was hard to move my hand. All right, now I want you to go ahead and let's do the same thing. Put the item in front of you. I've got my glass. In fact, this time I'm going to try a pen. I put the pen down. Okay, now I want you to take your dominant hand, okay, whichever it is, mine happens to be right, and I'm going to put it under my other hand. This hand has to choose to go with my dominant hand, because the dominant hand is not grabbing it and applying pressure. I'm just resting my hand, my non-dominant. Imagine that is the child's hand. Okay? This is the child's hand. This is my dominant hand. I'm sliding it under the hand, and I'm going to go pick it up. Close your eyes now and pick it up. Then what I want you to do is I want you to take the object and see how you can get that object to touch the non-dominant hand. And if you want to open your eyes and watch what I'm doing, that's fine. If you've already figured it out and know how to do it, that's great. That's my non-dominant hand. Okay. Now, tell me what your non-dominant hand was noticing. What did you notice with your non-dominant hand? That's my left hand. I don't know about yours. What were you paying attention to? The movement, that it was in control. It felt gentler. Any other comments? The other hand was doing something. I noticed that. Less anxiety. Trust takes place, more freedom. My non-dominant hand fingertips touched the table. I could take my hand away if I wanted to. I felt more in control. That's exactly right. And if I take, it's not as intrusive. Nice comment. If I take my hand off while the dominant hand is starting to go for the pen or whatever it is, and I pull my hand back, okay, I have the control. I'm the one who's choosing to be an active participant. So that hand under hand piece, the hand under, always means the person who's trying to show the child something. So the one that is under. So take a look at the picture on your PowerPoint screen, and keep in mind, note that the person who seems to be standing is the instructor. So is this slide, in this slide, is the hand under hand being used? Remember, if I want to show the child something, I'm going to be the one who's putting my hand under theirs. Good. This always gets a little tricky because you could say hand over hand, meaning the child's hand is over. So that's why it gets confusing. But it is very clearly a technique that requires that the child choose to be active with you and not just passive. If I know the child really well and I go to take their hand, okay, and take them to something, if they trust me, I could move them anywhere like a rag doll. However, if I put my hand under theirs and I start to move and they don't, that's what requires the activeness. And somebody says, yeah, but, first of all, the child doesn't know what you want, which is right. So I may slide my hand under theirs and I might take my baby finger and kind of just hold a little bit to give them the idea of where I want them to go. And the minute I find resistance and they pull back, I let go. And I wait a few seconds, and I go back in under their hand, and I want to make sure maybe that their favorite toy or their favorite activity of playing in the water is very close. It's right here. I don't have to take them very far. Later, I'll make it a little bit further distance. But in the beginning, I may just want to be able to do this to say, hey, I want to show you something. And it's right here. And we got there, and I was able to slide off and they could touch their favorite thing, whether it was playing in the water or it was a special toy. So that's hand under hand. Okay? Learning to trust. That's one of the biggest things about hand under hand. And many of you said, I felt comfortable, I felt trust, I felt in control. I felt like I was the one making the decision. The brain then knows what to pay attention to. Most of you talked about the fact that when your dominant hand went on top of the non-dominant and pretending that the non-dominant is the child, that all you noticed was what was on top of your hand, and that's what your brain does. Okay? Your brain is paying attention to this. I remember the first experience I had with this, and I happened to do it with another person in this training, and she's around the same age I am, and so this was years ago. But I noticed immediately, because her hand was on top of mine. I noticed immediately. I thought, my gosh, she's got such soft hands, and I'm a gardener, and I'm out in there, and I don't have soft hands. And that's all I could think of the whole time. I never paid attention to what she was trying to get me to do. When she went under my hand to take me, then I was paying attention to what was happening down here, which is what most of us want to do. We don't want them to pay attention to our hand holding them or even gently guiding them. They're still paying attention. It's about active participation in learning, and it's also about confirmation. Confirmation that, yes, this is where we're going. Yes, this is what I'd like you to see. And if the child is showing me something and I slide my hand under and I touch the book that she's looking at or that she's feeling, that's my way of being there to confirm for her, oh, I see that book you're looking at, whether it's looking visually or whether it's looking tactily or both. Okay, what I'd like to do is, I'm going to do one more. This is another example of hand under hand. Okay, so tell me who the leader of this is. Okay, who is the person trying to communicate or trying to show the person something? Is it the man or is it the woman? Let's do it this way. Whew, you guys were so fast. The man, the man, the man. Okay, great. That's wonderful. So what I'd like to do is go to two video clips. One we saw last week, but this week I want you to pay attention to the fact that here's a child who knows nothing about hand under hand. Okay? And my experience with him, it was my first day of trying to figure out where I could go with him to start to see if he would tolerate hand under hand and how much it was going to take me to help the staff to be able to do this. So with that, I would like to have you, the screen should be up for all of you, and I would like you to, in that triangle, for those of you who can see it, press play now.
Okay. And this side, middle and last name. We're doing that this week. And where do you think you're big enough to learn your middle name? You're going to see the teacher's logo on there. Caleb Noble Hunter. Do you have an O? Such interesting middle names. You sure do, Caleb. Good afternoon. Glenn. I can't believe this.
What is his?
Look at his middle name is so similar. Noble and Nolan. That's very similar. Glenn. Now this is different than yesterday. Glenn, do you have an O in your name? That's it, Glenn. Thumbs up. You're right. And good afternoon, Glenn.
Glenn has
N. Yeah. John. You're right, John. You have one on. Good
and
afternoon.
I have a little H that's really bad.
Yeah, you do. Oh, Courtney Matt. Courtney's middle name is Matthew. He still only has one. And won't be here till tomorrow. Now, think really big. Now raise your hand if you have an O.
It's different now.
It's different. Nicholas does. Now make.
Okay, let's try watching it again. Click on the screen. This is Katie. Click on the screen and then watch the video again, okay?
And this side, middle and last name. We're doing that this week. And where do you think you're big enough to learn your middle name? You're going to see the teacher's logo on there. Caleb Noble Hunter. Do you have an O? Such interesting middle names. You sure do, Caleb. Good afternoon. Glenn. no one. That's very similar. Glenn, now this is different than yesterday. Glenn, do you have an O in your name? That's it, Glenn. Thumbs up, you're right. And good afternoon, Glenn.
Glenn has
Yeah. John. You're right, John. You have one on. Good
and I
afternoon.
have a little A type of Billy Bat.
Yeah, you do. Oh, Courtney. His middle name is Matthew. He still only has one. And won't be here till tomorrow. Now, think really big. Now raise your hand if you have an O.
It's different now.
It's different. Nicholas does. Now Nicholas.
Okay. I did disappear, but I'm back. Can everybody hear me? Put a green check if you can hear. Okay, good. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why I got kicked off the system. I must have said the wrong thing. Anyway, let's go ahead.
Excuse me a minute, Kathee. Can you transmit video again?
Working on it.
All right, thanks.
Okay. So I'm assuming you all got to see the video. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, good. So in the case of Glenn, one of the things that happened was I had to really pay attention to him, and that movement of his, of going back and forth, was pretty much non-intentional for a while. Did any of you pick up some places where it appeared that he was starting to be intentional? And if you did, could you type into the chat room and say where it was that you thought it was starting to be intentional? When he rested his hands on yours, when you were rubbing the water thing, when he kept his hand on yours when you were patting that water thingy, Kelly, when you were both touching the water mat together, he quieted his whole body except his hands and then followed your lead to explore the plastic thing. When you waved your hand on the surface and he let his hands glide with yours. Those were the very beginning. This is not something that there's a gene for it for kids to really understand. It is about you being with him and moving with him in the moment. And even then, like I said to you last week, for those of you who are on, I felt that there were places I went too fast. I was moving too fast. And I could look back at that and see that, but at the moment, I didn't. So that's one of the things I really want to encourage all of you to videotape yourself working with kids. I think you will be amazed at the things you learn about yourself, good as well as things you want to change. And just get over the, oh my gosh, my hair looks awful and all that stuff. So keep that in mind. The wait time was important, and he appeared to go at his own pace. And I think he did, but just so you know, I just felt like it was just a little too fast. So let's go to the other video, and we'll see if I don't get kicked off this time. Okay. The one coming up is another way to show you hand under hand in a very different way used. This is a father of a young child, and I want you to pay attention to another way to use it. Every child is different, and when I go in, I find I have to do something different. Sometimes I'll go around the child and come in. Sometimes children hate that, and I'll go from the side, or I'll come in from the front, or I'll come in from an angle. So keep that in mind, that it's not something that I can teach you here, step 1, 2, 3, 4. It's different for every child. So with that, let's play Joel. Let's push play now.
Okay, so let's crawl to the window. Should we crawl to the window? Let's crawl. Where's my hands? There they are. Sweet crawl, big slobber. Crawl to the window. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Up. Yeah.
You find a window?
Okay, so that's Joel, and once again, I saw some things with Joel and his dad that were very exciting and that some of us don't even think about trying hand under hand in a movement kind of activity. We sometimes think about hand under hand being things that we're going to look at together, which is great. But also, here was a chance for me, if I'm under his hands and I'm moving, I'm doing a more natural movement and I'm doing it at a pace that's more natural. So one of you talked earlier about that issue that, oh gosh, you know, I can feel the movement. And that's one of the things you want to do, because when you've got your hand on top of somebody's and you're trying to get them to turn a knob and they're thinking, here's a round knob I'm going to turn, but it's one of those others that you push down, it gets very confusing. And it's like, I don't know what you want me to do. But if I'm taking you along, then it's like, oh, I got it, and I can feel what that crawling is like. Just a reminder, too, to people that if you can't see the videos, there are a couple things that could be wrong, but we will have these as recordings with all the videos intact. Every recording we've ever done, you've been able to see all the videos, and those will be up at the end of February, as Katie said. So those ideas of hand under hand, it also, for some children who may need tactile signing, it is a great way to introduce. So we're talking about trust. We're talking about the brain paying attention. Okay? Oh, I'm supposed to pay attention to the movement of what my dad's doing with his arms, or the movement that Kathy's doing, or I can come down on her hands and, oh boy, she's not making me do something. Okay? All right. Pacing. Pacing and waiting. And I've got those together, and it's not because pacing is the same thing as waiting, but pacing is how quickly do you get through something. And then the waiting is how long do I wait for the child to respond? Because we're talking about strategies that are important for the child to become an active learner. Okay, an active participant in what is happening. And I had a great email today from a teacher who was talking about not having this child do all this coloring, but is there something that's more three-dimensional that I can be working on with numbers? And that's the idea, is how do I make her more of a participant and it make more sense and meaning and be meaningful to her? Okay, so here's some things. When I hear the student is expected to follow the same schedule as other students, I get a little bit worried, because right away I think here's a child who needs to go at his pace or her pace, and already I'm hearing that the schedule has to be followed and there's no exceptions. So I start to have concerns about that child being an active learner. Another comment. She needs to keep up with the others since we are including her. Okay? What is your purpose for including the student? If it's to go at the other children's pace, where is she going to be or he going to be the active participant? How do they actively participate if they're going so fast that they have no idea what's happening next, and somebody's just grabbing or doing it for them? You know, I've had a parent say to me, I would just love once for my child's art project to come home and it be a mess and me know that she actually did it. And I know we all like to send something nice home, and some parents really want something nice. But the reality is some of our parents just want to know that their child made it, and it went at their pace, not at the rest of ours. Okay. I'd like to go to one more slide. I doubt active learning by the child is a priority, and I've heard that too. You know, we need to get through these IEP goals and objectives, and I don't see that as the priority. So that idea that active learning is not a priority puts our children into a passive role, and we're, as we talked about last week, we're talking about actually teaching them how to have learned helplessness. So that's another one of those comments. Okay, so I'd like us to go to a video, and this video is a little boy named Christopher, and some of you saw him last week at a different age. I'd like you to think about the idea of pacing and waiting on the part of the adult, and what does Christopher do? So by now you should see Christopher. He's in a stander, and it's a green Mylar, and Christopher does have a vision impairment, and the purpose of this was to get him to bring his head up and to look at something. That was their purpose. But I want you to pay attention to everything in this, all right? Push play now.
Really?
Okay, so for those of you who could see, this was Christopher. Somebody was shaking Mylar, a Mylar pom-pom in front of him, and what was happening there was her trying to get him to look at it. What did you see happen that you think maybe was an issue of pacing and waiting? And go ahead and just type in. He started too high. It was for him to reach it himself. Too much shaking by the adult. It was too quick. A little too fast changing where the item was. Weren't waiting long enough for a response. Once he started feeling the item, she could have let him explore it a bit more. So that's part of what we're talking about with the idea of going ahead and how I pace the activity with him, and then how I get him to be actively responsive. How do I get him to actively participate? And so one of the issues was that as he started to pick up the Mylar and feel it, the adult the first time went right back into shaking it. Okay? The second time, she waited a little bit longer, which was good. The question is, how do I confirm, and I haven't used this statement yet, but how do I confirm for him that, oh, you like playing with that? I can talk to him and say, oh, you like that Mylar. Another way I can confirm with him is to slide my hand next to his so that as he is exploring that little bit of the Mylar, I can be exploring it with him, saying, yes, I see the same thing you do. It's smooth, or it's shiny, or whatever it is we want to say about it. But it's my pacing. It's I need to pick out the pace, and then I need to let him respond. And when he responds, I need to let him know that I saw him respond. And so I haven't used the word confirmation in here, but that's typically a term we use when I'm letting somebody know. And many times I will let a child know by looking in their eyes and saying, and he's looking at me and saying, yes, I know. But for a child with a vision impairment, that might not be the best way for me to help confirm that we're looking at the same thing or enjoying the same thing. Okay, let's go on. I want to talk a little bit about some tips for waiting. And I sure had to learn these because I was and still can be notoriously focused on where I want to go next, and I don't do the kind of waiting and the slowing down. So often I kind of have to, in my brain, turn myself down or to slower when I'm working with children with multiple disabilities, because their processing time, my waiting for them, my pacing has to match them. Okay? So, a couple tips here. First, ask yourself the question, what am I waiting for? And is she capable of that action? If I'm waiting for her to do something I've never seen her do before, which I have seen again and again, and I have done, I have made every mistake. So keep in mind, what is it I really wanted him to do? Was it that I wanted him to lift his head and look and follow? Well, is he capable of lifting his head for more than a short period of time and following in that stander? I don't know. So the question is, do I? All right? Then let's do, I would like to do one more video, and I want to do this video. This is in a child's home. His little sister, he's kind of sitting between his little sister's legs, and they're going to play a game. And I want you to pay attention again about pacing and about waiting. And there are adults talking in the background with each other. There's a visiting person providing some assistance to the family. So I want you to watch, once again, about the pacing and the waiting. And here's one of those ways to get siblings to connect with each other. Okay, so let's press play now.
That, Maury?
Row your boat's one of his best, huh?
Get me down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Okay, rockboard is here.
Well, what do you think he's telling you now?
He's
Is he saying do it
some more.
again?
Sing some
Did
more,
he?
maybe.
You think he wants you to do it again?
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Like a spider's dream. Listen, he was laying like this.
Oh.
This is his favorite part. He likes this.
Well, it sounds to me like he's singing again.
Yeah, see, like that one he just did almost sounds like more to me.
More. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay, so let's think in terms again of the issue. Well, we've already talked about this one, but we saw evidence of picking something that he likes. It was about reading some of his behavior, and I don't mean bad behavior of kicking, biting, screaming, but of vocalizing that he was indicating something purposeful that he wanted more of. And people were starting to recognize that and try to pick up. They waited, though. They didn't wait and say, would you like more? And that's what we all fall into, myself included. I want to ask that question right away of, do you want more? If I want the child to be an active learner, that means he or she needs to initiate. And that means I wait. And then when I hear that little voice making sound, I can take it as I want more, and we will do it again. But it was very relaxed and comfortable. It was not something like, okay, I need to check off on my paper that he communicated more 4 times. It was I needed to go at his pace. And then when he started vocalizing and the little sister didn't pick that up, but the adult did, it was, oh, yeah, okay, he's communicating. So that's that consistency piece. Then we consistently need to go ahead and respond right away to the child because we want them to do it again and again so we can start to shape that behavior into a communication. Okay, let's go on with some more tips. Be aware of anything environmentally that the student may have attended to. Sometimes what happens is something happens in the background or over to the side, and because we're so focused, we missed it, but the child auditorily may have heard something that they're more interested in than what we're doing. So one of the things you want to do is, gosh, if somebody just started the vacuum cleaner at home or some blender at school because everybody's having blender drinks, then I might want to interrupt this to take him over because he's the one who got distracted by it. So pay attention to the environment even when you're trying to stay focused on that child and saying, oh gosh, you know, that's the blender. So let's go over and feel the blender and see the drinks, and maybe we get to have some. Have your hand or your arm very close to the child on the desk or the wheelchair arm in the same place always, so he knows where he can connect with you to give you the answer, to get confirmation, to give you confirmation that he saw what you wanted him to see. If I'm far away across, and oftentimes we're working across a table, and I'm working with him, then is that table short enough, narrow enough, that I can put my hand next to his, and he knows I always stick my left hand next to his arm, so he knows where I am. And for those of you who are working with kids who have, quote, normal vision and normal hearing, but have multiple disabilities, it is amazing that for some of these children, touch is very important. And even though they can see you and they can make eye contact, some of these kids are very tactile in nature. Okay? All right. With that, I'd like to go to the next video. This is Joel in a box. Okay? His mom is pulling him around in it. What I'd like you to do is to look at how mom waits, paces, and think in your mind, would I do it the same way? Would I have waited longer? What might you have changed? Because I'm going to ask you to type that in the chat window. So, with Joel in a box, press play now.
I should get that. He doesn't know where he's at. He'll put his hand down and try and figure out where he's at.
Do you want to go? Go. Do you want to go? Go more.
So think about what is something that you might do differently than mom did. Does it make mom wrong? Once again, I want to remind you of what I said last week. These families and the people that serve these kids in schools and centers and other programs, home programs, have been so gracious. And so I don't want you to walk away thinking that this mom doesn't know what she's doing, because she does. I want you to think, though, if you were to be doing that, what might you do? Having eye contact when Joel says yes. The same movement for all the rides. Waiting for the second pat on the side of the box. Get down on the child's level to communicate. Maybe wait a little longer. Maybe more like a go sign. Wait long to give the child a chance to initiate. So if I keep asking, do you want more? Do you want to go? Some children end up thinking that they can't ever just initiate. And so, for example, one of the students I worked with, one day, he never got sick, and one day he just said, Mrs. Baker, is Mrs. Baker sick? Does she want to go home? What it was he was sick and he wanted to go home, but because so many people had talked only in questions and didn't wait for him to initiate something, he got the idea that you have to ask a question other than just making a statement. So when Mom didn't get the slap, that little slap on the box he'd been given, she jiggled the box to kind of get a reaction from him. She could have waited for the slap again. When the child tapped on the box, that did seem to show excitement and wanting more. The second time I would have waited longer for him to respond. And so it might be initiating. Do I need to ask the question again, or we're doing something so fun that I know he loves, that if we just stop, I just wait for him to finally do something. Because his go, Mom said, do you want to go? So he's imitating instead of initiating. So that doesn't mean you can't ask questions, okay? Because you can. But think in terms of, how can I get that child to initiate more instead of? And that comment about putting your hand over by the table or down by the box, in Joel's case, it's him being able to let me know. He may even just tap, or he may take my hand, like do something, anything for him to initiate with me. And if he does say go, then that's gravy for all of us. Okay? So once again, keep in mind that there's some different ways to look at this. And then I'm going to do one more before we go to the next. Once you've asked a question, slowly count to 10 to slow yourself down. Instead of, do you want to go? Do you want to go? You want to go? You want more? Then you change the language. So every time you interrupt with the question again, you end up delaying the response and the processing, because now the child's attending you to see if there's something else you're saying to him. He can't wipe you out and say, I'm going to answer the first question. So he gets really confused. Processing time is different for all of us, and isn't that the truth? Some of you would like me to hurry up because you already know this, and others of you would like me to slow down. And for some of you, I may be going the right pace. Okay, so let's go to the next video, and this is Erin, and this is the one I thought was from last week, but we'll see. This is a video of a teacher getting her to respond to something she doesn't want. Okay, but I want you to pay attention to the teacher and how many times she asked the question. Okay, let's press play now.
Okay. You want a drink, Erin? Here, do you want a drink? No, you have to tell me no. Thank you. No.
Let's play this one more time. It is very short. So let's, can we go back in? Press play now for those of you who could.
Okay. You want a drink, Erin? Here, do you want a drink? No, you have to tell me no. Thank you. No.
Okay, so how many times did she ask the question? And guess how many seconds between those, the times she asked the question. Kim already said she asked twice, okay? Yep, it was, some people think 2 seconds, some people think 5. I'd say about 1 second. She asked twice, about 5 seconds between, and actually it was only about 2.5 seconds between the first time and the second time. It is amazing how quickly we ask that question again when we don't get that immediate response from the children. So keep in mind, you have to give that child some time once you've asked her to process it. Now, did anybody notice the difference between the first question? The second question was pretty much the same question. But what was different? There was one thing different. Did anybody notice what the teacher did the second time that she didn't the first time? Yes, right. She actually brought the can of pop, and when she asked the question the second time, she ended up putting the cold can of pop against Aaron's hand. Now, what do you assume that Aaron doesn't like? Something that's cold, cold cans, or that she knows something cold comes with pop, and she doesn't like pop. Maybe she doesn't like the caffeination or the carbonation. So those are things that you want to think about too. And maybe when the teacher didn't get the immediate response from her, she went to the next level of information. Did she need to go to that level of information? I don't know. I don't know from this short clip. But it's one of those things, don't jump too fast. Wait and give her a chance. Okay? And how did we know that she didn't want it? The teacher already knew that this was a dislike of hers and used it. And they were working on getting her to point to a picture that, and I'm sorry that I couldn't show you that, that was no. And so when she said, well, you have to point to it, Erin's hand went to the no. She recognized the visual of what was like, I don't want it, thank you very much. She also pushed that can away. She didn't want it. And the first time she got one of those, I can tell you, it was not a nice push away. So she had made some great gains to slowly move. You know, it was like, no, thank you, I don't want it. No, we were working at getting her to do something that was socially acceptable of no, thank you, I don't want it. So she gently pushed it away. The teacher said, well, tell me. And Erin knew that that means she has to touch a picture. That's what tell me means for her. Okay. Just go. Use a stopwatch in the beginning to see how long the wait needs to be. For some children, they need a 5, 6, 7 wait. I saw a teacher do something very interesting. She had about 4 kids she was working with, and she asked this one student a question and said, remember that question, find the answer for me. She went to 2 more students and then came back to that student, and that student had the answer. So she had worked long enough to realize that I can ask this child a question, get 2 more questions in with other kids, and come back and she'll have the answer. So that's another thing to look at, and that's why using a stopwatch is helpful. So this is a routine for a high school student. I don't want you to think about all kids being young here. This next video is Ryan. It has to do with the braces, the AFOs that he wears on his legs. And the school was establishing a very consistent routine for this student to understand every step to doing it. So with that, we're just waiting, and here we go. He's in high school. This is Ryan, and just so you get a chance to know him, I want you to pay attention again to the pacing by the adult, to the waiting that might be happening, and whether or not you think that the processing time is working pretty well. So let's press play now.
These are your splints. We're going to put these on. Sure. You're going to put them on your feet. Okay. Ryan, I'm going to pick your leg up. in your foot, and I'm going to put it on my leg. Right in your leg, my leg. Ryan, I took your shoe off. Took your shoe off. Now, does that tickle? Got your sock, Ryan. Your sock. Ryan, next I'm going to put some lotion. Put lotion on your leg. Go right on your ankle, on your feet, your toes. Get some circulation going.
Okay. One of the things, imagine that this routine has been consistent for quite a while now. Same person, same place, same sequence they're doing it in, no interruptions, so he doesn't get confused by her delaying something. What I want you to think about is, let's say it's the same. What are some ways that Ryan could be more active in this activity once he's got the routine and understands it, the sequence? Go ahead and type. Yeah, exactly. Maybe he would be able to lift the one leg up to the IA's leg because she always has him do the left one first. And so she might say, Ryan, okay, we're ready. Let's start. Your turn. Something to that effect to get the idea that it's his turn, so that he can start to initiate guiding part of that process. And several of you got that one as an easy one. There could be a table next to them, and he could actually put his shoes and socks on it. Another great thought, to add that to the routine. He could hold his orthotics prior to putting on the second one. Another one. Great. Where the splints Velcro, yeah, they do have Velcro on them. Have him touch or tear the Velcro to open it. So those are all great ideas about trying to get him to initiate, but at the same time, how did you feel about the pace that the aide went at? How many of you felt that that was it seemed to be a pretty good pace for him? Put a green check if you thought it was. Yeah, they worked hard. That IA, that instructional aide, worked very hard at slowing that down. And somebody else made the comment is, could he pull his own socks off? Or could they work towards his pulling the socks off? Another good question. Okay, great. Let's go to, I'm going to do this pretty quickly because this in itself is a whole day training, but I just want to remind you that those activities you're planning need to be meaningful to the child. What are the concepts that the child has to have in order for this activity to make sense? So some of the concepts that they were working with Ryan on, since he was the last one, is the idea of lifting his leg, of putting on his orthotics, of taking his sock off. So this is my sock, this is my shoe, something's different. Can this activity have a consistent routine or consistent way? Yes. What communication is part of this activity? Maybe it's the naming and the vocabulary that go with sock and shoe and foot and leg. How do I know I have the child's attention? Great question. If you do not have the child's attention and he or she is distracted by other things, how do you get their attention? And again, it's about pacing, it's about waiting, and it's about how is it that I can attract the child. And the first thing is, it has to be meaningful to them. If I'm talking about race cars for the very first time and the child doesn't even have a clue what a car is, but I'm talking about race cars, out somewhere there might be an understanding of a car and it's kind of floating in the air, okay? But I don't have a way to pull it back and I don't have a way to associate it. So that's one of the strategies. You've got to use meaningful activities for the child. Okay. This last strategy is an environment that the child knows and can access. What must be done to make the environment accessible to the child? If I am constantly changing things around, even the location in the room where the child does a consistent activity, it is not consistent. If at one moment we're over here doing it because we're not interrupting some other group over here, but the next day we do that activity somewhere else, do you also see how some of the ideas you all had, like putting socks and shoes up on the table, that would be an issue, okay, because now all of a sudden we're on the other side of the table's not there, so we've changed it. And for some of the kids, it becomes a whole new activity. I think we're going to go on into the environment. I'd like to go ahead and have us talk about the space for active learning. And with that, how accessible are things really for the child? If we're busy talking about things happening in all the different parts of the room, how does the child get to those parts of the room? And here's another important question for all of us to ask, and that is, how reasonable is it to make every single thing accessible? So I'll just give you an example. A lady in the grocery store the other day, I was getting something and she came to me and she was pretty short, much shorter than I was. And she said, "Oh good, you're tall. Could you come over and get this thing off the shelf for me?" Okay, they didn't make it accessible to a short person, but she knew how to get somebody who was taller than she was, who understood the concept, to get me to get it for her. So I just want to put that in as a quickie for you to be thinking about. How really accessible? What things do we truly need to make accessible? And in this case, what we did, and I just tossed this in, and it's also on your guide, your outline form. This is called Texan Taught, and it is probably one of the best websites that I have found for simple little modifications and adaptations. So I'm just tossing that into you today. We're not going to get on it, but it's a good website. So, Space for Active Learning. I already talked a little bit about Lily Nielsen. She calls it the little room. She is very specific about how it's built. They are purchased from LilyWorks. They are fairly pricey. Some of us in the States decided to make it cheaper so that we could get it in homes for families who couldn't afford it, etc. Okay? So I just want to talk a little bit about a space for active learning. Okay? I just went back so somebody could see that. It's an environment in which nothing happens unless the child makes it happen. That means I don't talk to the child when they're in the space for active learning. It means I let them control. I don't try to teach them anything about the little room when they're in the little room. I can always take the things out of the little room and play with them with the child at another time. And I can show them how the slinky works. I can show them how something works. I don't do it while they're in the little room. The perception of yourself occurs through interaction with people, knowledge of your surroundings, and mastery of skills. And one of the things Lily decided is, what she said was, she said, if I can't get to the room, meaning I can't explore the whole room because I may be passive, I may have physical disabilities, I may have other disabilities, and I can't get to that room and explore it, then she brought the room to the child. And that was the idea, is to make a little room. And so for us, we call it a space for active learning because it's designed a little bit differently, that's all. So this is the picture that you see here on the slide is a large one for a larger child and for a child who's in a wheelchair, actually a young man who was in a wheelchair. So you can make them to fit different sizes of people. We really like it when you do it when the children are really young because they miss so much time if you don't. Treasure baskets. And once again, this is on your resource sheet, so please don't try to copy all that. What are they and why do we use them? The concept was developed and the idea was to have a box in which you had lots of different things that the child would come into contact every day, spoons and plates and things that had natural textures, not just plastic. And the idea that the child could root around in it and explore it. One of the reasons why the idea of having it in a space is that you actually want things to hang down from it that you have selected and actually allow the child to find out spatially where it is and show that they have spatial memory. Not special, spatial. Spatial memory. So, keep this in mind as we go through this. How do I explain this to the family or the staff or the administrator? They come in and see this child, and sometimes it's a 15-year-old, and the idea is, oh my gosh, what is this 15-year-old doing in this thing, playing with these things? Okay? So, let's go ahead, and I'd like to show a video. This is a little girl's very first time in a space for active learning. So I'd like you to just watch it and get a sense of what this is. And think about what questions you might have and some ideas that you might have of do you have a child you think this would work for? If you have a student who walks around the room and plays with things, in general, I would tell you that that's not the one for this child, that a space for active learning is not one. We'll go over things next week and probably finish up the space for active learning next week because I'm seeing what time it is. So with that, and also someone communicated that they've even made folding ones that don't stay up. And so I'd rather have you watch the video first so you'll really understand that comment by her. So with that, I'd like us to press play now.
Said no way, Mama.
Okay, so now you have a sense of what, for those of you who are not familiar at all, have a sense of what a little room looks like, or a space for active learning. So one of the things I'd like you to be thinking about, and I'm going to show you a couple different things this week, and I'm going to hold them up to the camera, and hopefully I'm going to be able to figure it out in relationship to me. You may have noticed that there were things hanging down in the little room, and those things that were hanging down were identified by people probably as things she liked, or that they were exploring to see what she does like. So when you think about that, what would you guess, based on watching Andy Rose, what would you think are some of her likes? Sound, reflective things, shiny things, yeah, the bell. Is it the bell because it's nice and cold feeling because it's metal, or because it makes sound? Those are all possibilities. Those easy things to grasp. One of the things I always watch for is if the child is playing using his hands, I'm wanting to know what could he grasp in his hand. And sometimes we hang things down that are really too big for the child, especially for some children who may have cerebral palsy or other motor issues, that we need to look for what are some things that are stringy or things with holes in them that their fingers can go into. The handouts that I gave, that I sent, one refers to the stages of behavior in the little room, demonstrating skills in the little room, what to consider when you're putting stuff in the little room. If I know that a child absolutely hates something, I do not put it in that space for active learning. Or if you're using a little room purchased from Lilyworks, I don't put dislike things. It is not meant to be a torture chamber. Some students will start in there for 2 to 5 minutes. Other students may start in there for 25 minutes. Other students may be 20 minutes before they even move. And that I have found several times is you have to hang the stuff close enough to their body that they barely will move and they will come in contact with it. And I always make sure that the space for active learning is long enough so that if the student is using his or her feet better than they're using their hands and fingers right now, that they have the opportunity to connect with things. So I'm going to talk just very briefly about a couple things. This is not meant to be a babysitter. This is not one of those, I'm going to put the child in here and I'll come back in 20 minutes, because some of the items you may put in there, they may get wrapped around their hand or their finger. And generally, I do not interfere. If I see a finger start to turn blue, of course I do. I go in and I unwind their finger. But I have to tell you, with students I have who don't even hardly move much with their hands, and they get tangled up in it, I have been amazed at how they can get out of things that I wouldn't have expected them to be able to do. And once again, we're talking about jumping in and not waiting long enough for them to explore and to learn how to problem solve. For some of our students, because there are not good assessment tools, one of the things that happens is that we use problem solving as a way to get a sense of their cognitive skill. Well, if they've never had the opportunity to solve a problem, because the minute they get upset, somebody jumps in and takes care of them. Or as I mentioned in the last webinar training series on the communication matrix, how does a child get your attention? And the comment is, well, they don't have to because I'm always there. You don't allow them to learn a problem-solving technique and set it up for them. So, one of the things I've seen is, so far I have not met any children at all who, if you have the right things in the little room and you do it right, don't enjoy it. I have heard people say, oh, you know, he's crying and he's fussy, or he's not doing anything in the little room. One of the questions that was asked on the last video with Andy Rose was, what do you think she might be doing when she's still when she stops. So what are 2 or 3 things you think she might be doing when she doesn't keep moving the bell or the mylar and she just stops? Processing, exactly. She's processing the environment. She's processing, gosh, you mean I just made, well, oh my gosh, every time I do this, then I hear that cool sound, that bell ringing. It's how kids start to associate a sound with them being able to make it. Let alone, you know, we think about children developing their skill of hearing something and turning towards it. But this is about, oh, I hear the sound, and now I know what made it, and I made it make it. So with that, figuring out cause and effect, exactly, contemplating, resting maybe. I've had kids in the little room who will go for about 20 minutes, and they are just going and going and going and going, every once in a while stopping briefly, but going and going. And then there was a little girl who would fall asleep, and she'd sleep for about 3 minutes. She'd wake up and start going again. So those are things that you want to check out. Yes, testing to see what happens, learning that she's the one that made it happen. If I go in and talk to her and say, Andy, Rose, are you having fun? Did you see that happening in that video, that anybody was talking to her? If you did, put a green check. Did you see anybody talking to her? Yeah, I see a red X. Yeah. No, nobody was talking to her, because if I start talking to her, then it might be that she gets the idea as soon as that person opens their mouth and goes, yep, yep, blah, 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 then that's what makes that bell ring. And then I don't get to learn that I'm the one who made the bell ring. So it's learning about your own body. And you can, if you have a lot of noise going on and a lot of things happening in the classroom, when the child's in the space for active learning, you can have the child get distracted. The idea of the sides and the top and the back are to dampen the outside sound. And it's also meant to keep whatever sounds are made, it kind of amplifies it, especially if you put the space for active learning on top of a resonance board, and we'll talk about that next week. Okay. Just in a few minutes, just a reminder, Michaela or Mary Claire are going to put the Survey Monkey up for you to answer some questions and evaluate the session for us. We are not going to get through everything today, so we're going to continue with this next week. But I'd like you to take some time looking at the information that was sent to you. We will send out the PowerPoint tomorrow as far as we got. But think in terms of how, if you thought this might work for a student you're working with, how have you, since some of you are familiar with it, how have you been able to explain it? In what words have you explained it to the family or the other staff or the administrator? That this child needs this environment. Why do they need the environment? So for some of you who already have used this for some of your students, what are some of the things you've said? Object permanence, something that stays because it is hanging. So, for example, if you notice that Andy Rose had some things twisted around, that's elastic. And one of the things we know about elastic is if it's thick, it's harder to pull. If it is medium, it's a little less hard to pull. And if it's very thin, it's very easy to pull. Okay, and it's a little hard to see against my shirt, but I'll do it up there. But if they twist around because the child's very active, I will sometimes slide the elastic inside a tube that you get like at the hardware store. You know, you buy so many feet, and then hang it from the top and tie the toy on here at the bottom so that they will not twist around each other. This tubing keeps that from happening. And you may have looked and seen a popsicle stick at the top through those holes in the roof. of the little room, you can also use something that's called a cord stop. And you use those with the winter coat, to keep the wind from coming in your hood. But you can slide that on and slide it up and down if you want through those holes. That's an easier way to do it. Doesn't mean you can't use popsicle sticks. So that's another way. Those are some things that you want to think about too, is what would I want to do? So here's my request for next week, and that is that you think in terms of this. Is there a child that you're thinking might benefit who may be so passive that they are not actively learning, they're not participating because of either the way we've set things up or a combination of how capable are they? And I'm thinking about a child that I have worked with in the past who the only part of his body that he was able to move was his one baby finger on his right hand. So think in terms of, if you've got a child who's very involved, this still does not mean that you can't use this. But if you've got a kid who's tearing around the room or able to get to wherever he wants to get in the room, then the reality of it is this may not be the right tool. So I'd like you to read over the stuff that was sent to you in preparation for next week. And we're going to talk a little bit about data collection and also about the fact that you do not write as a goal or an objective in an IEP the child will play with items or explore items for 20 minutes in the space for active learning or in the little room. That's not the goal. The goal is, okay, so start typing. What do you think the goal is based on what you know? What's the purpose of using it? Self-empowerment, to initiate play, teach the child to self-initiate, improve spatial awareness, initiate activities, the freedom of exploration. I get to play with this thing as long as I want, not as long as you want me to. And that's the problem with those of us who take little things out of a box and then we play, or the idea of taking some texture like a piece of cloth and then we run it over the child's hand or over their arm. We do that for as long as we want. We don't necessarily do it for as long as they want. Or do we even know if they like it or if they even know what we're doing? To let them learn to play actively on their own, to put the child in control, controlling their own environment. These are all good. To go to a safe place with cool things they really like. The child will initiate play and object permanence, to know where you are in space. Okay, to encourage movement, even little movement. To develop independence, to build a home range. This is kind of my home range, or this is my little cubby, my little den, and I know everything about it. And you'll often watch kids run their hands along the border because they want to find out where are the boundaries. To form perceptions, concepts, and language. Sound the child produces and its source. To prevent the development of blindisms. I always have my body with me, and therefore some of the blindisms I do are in relationship to the fact that I've always got that in case I don't have other things to explore. Okay? Let me see what. And this is a larger picture of that one that I showed earlier. This happened to be a child who went in a wheelchair, and things were hung down for him to explore. I've also seen a child go in a prone stander and explore them. So you heard them talk about the fact that she was lying down, that Andy Rose was lying down, and then you heard that and then you saw that she was sitting in a little chair. For some kids, it's about lying down. For other kids, it's about sitting in a chair. For some, it's a prone stander. And the question is, what about a middle schooler? And the answer is, I've worked with 19-year-olds on this because they were still so passive they weren't doing anything. So it is about the measurement of their arm span out If they have one arm that's in and never moves out, then I do the measurement there. I mean, you build it to fit that child, the space for active learning. And with that, it's 6:29 according to my clock, which is an hour. I didn't keep you an extra hour. It's just an hour different here in Arizona. And next week, I will see you from, actually from Spokane. And if you have, once again, if you have questions, feel free to email me. And we'll keep going on the space for active learning, but then we're going to hit some other kinds of active learning devices that some that Lily Nielsen's used, some that she has not. And we will go from there. So you guys have a good evening. Thanks for coming. And look forward, great comments by some of you, by most of you, to answers to my questions. But for those who have used it, you know, you're going to make a great resource for other people too, who saw some of your comments that you did it. So with that, thanks. Take care. Bye.